Wim Hof breathing. So I'm thinking about, are you using the Wim Hof breathing method with your athletes? Did you have experience?
100%. The breathing is the core of my movement practice. It's the
The Wim
core
Hof
of my
breathing? Oh,
coaching.
yeah.
Well, looking at let's say that with the Wim Hof style breathing of scrubbing off CO2 and then potentially letting CO2 rise very high, getting the brain to be CO2 tolerant. I would say that, and I know he does more than that, and we're so grateful, but that would be, if I had to, just take a slice of what people understand about that breathing, that would be sort of the hallmark of what it is. We are using and have been using breathing now for 5 years as being able to understand the quality of my position. To understand the quality of my effort. So what's nice is that Wim said, hey, we're leaving a lot of performance on the table. But suddenly what we appreciated was, wow, we weren't breathing very well under load. And even people who do the Wim Hof training, and then I put them on a bike, they can't connect the dots, right? That's because Wim isn't necessarily in the gym training athletes, right? When I first began working on this breathing piece, many years ago, I had a woman who was trying to be the world's strongest man. She was at the Arnold competition, in a strongman competition. And she took second, and she should have won, but it was her first. She's an Olympic lifter. She's a phenomenal athlete. But what we would do is we would have her pre-breathe, for example. We didn't understand all of it. But we'd have her pre-breathe a ton. And then so she was already breathing like she was into the event. And then she would run into the event, and she would run out of time before she got tired breathing. And so we were like, oh, well, this is crazy. She just she never breathed hard because she was already topped off. She was already breathing. We've applied this to our Olympic lifting when we focused on the mechanics of the breathing, less about the brain and the physiology, which are really important too. What we saw was that we were getting our athletes to be able to pressurize more so that they could snatch American records, snatch, clean and jerk American records. And so what we saw is that suddenly we could use this style of breathing to improve the intra-abdominal pressure and volume of their athletes. But what we see is that when people are in pain, they have altered breathing. So the breathing became the root of our way to desensitize the brain and to restore motion in the spine. So I think what Wim saw was this incredible physiology. Allowing the CO2 to get high and have the brain be comfortable with that gave us more oxygen off of the hemoglobin, right? So we could go harder. We could be more toxic without, And what's happened now is that the athletes we train, no one ever gets too tired from breathing. This is never a problem anymore. They burn, they can't work hard enough, but the breathing is no longer the limit. We've taken the breathing limit is gone. It's always about the body now. And when we started to look at the mechanics of what was happening, when you take a breath in, you extend. When you breathe out, you flex. So if you're in spine pain, I can do a ton of motion, of restoring motion and dynamic movement to the spine of the chest, which unloads the spine, and I can get some extension and flexion. I can get the diaphragm to work differently from the psoas. I can get, how about moving the lymph through the trunk? Boom. So suddenly what we see is that we see improvements in the system of the contractile field to move and to maintain fluid pressures. And what do we see? Better expression on the bike, better running, better, right? Less compensation from breath holding. So, what we saw was that Wim opened up the door of possibility. And I will be forever grateful because he made breathing, when I saw and really began to, when I did my first course in 2008, someone gave me the notes recently, and I have a section on exhaling and parasympathetic downregulation. We're trying to change tissue. But man, it was like I kept walking, stepping over the piles of diamonds and gold. I was like, oh, these diamonds and gold on the ground, I'll just keep walking around these diamonds instead of picking them up. And so what we found was that when we began to put the breath in, it unified all movements, it unified down regulation, it unified up regulation, it unified performance, it unified pressure. And that people, so like while I'm sitting cross-legged here, right?
I'm standing.
That's right. So if I slouch, I try to take a breath here. Okay, now if I just see if I can take a bigger breath. That's a bigger breath.
Nice.
But yeah. I didn't tell myself to sit up and put my head in this position and organize my spine. I was able to say, hey, trust that my body will know what position I need to go in to maintain this breath position. Boom. I never coach posture anymore. What I say is, well, can you breathe in that position? Maybe it's not the best position because breathing seems to matter a lot to the brain. So, when we begin to understand what Iyengar, the yogi, said, nerves are king of the breath is king of the brain, then what we realize once again is that we're always doing this very sophisticated training. But if we're not talking about the breathing, once again, we're missing 90% of the benefit, right?
Yeah. Awesome.